Welcome to today's webinar, Get Financially Fit. I'm your host, Janet Barker Evans, and in honor of tax month, we're tackling a big topic for today's webinar, and that's money. So do you want to know the secrets of how to set yourself up for the retirement you want? Well, stay tuned, and you can ask our experts your most burning questions about saving for senior living, Medicare coverage, estate planning, and more. Plus, you can get the inside scoop on what senior living costs and why. But before I introduce you to our guest speakers, let's take a minute to talk about how you can interact with us during the webinar. So if you're on Zoom, things can be a little bit different from one computer to the next. But if you look at the bottom of the Zoom screen where you're seeing this webinar, you'll see some icons. The one on the far left is usually a microphone. Now we've muted your voice so there's no background noise, but I'll explain how you can ask questions or get technical help. So as far as the other buttons go, the most important ones are the ones that say Q&A and the one that says chat. When you click the Q&A button, a window will pop up where you could type any questions you have for our Q&A session at the end. Feel free to start asking questions anytime during our webinar, and we're going to get to as many as we can at the end. The chat button will open up a window where you can chat with the presenters and the moderator. If you're having any technical difficulties, let us know with chat, and our moderator will help if they can. If you're joining us via Facebook Live, simply pop your questions into the comment section and we'll get to them later. After the webinar today, you're also going to get a follow-up email with all of this information, as well as a recording of the webinar, so you can refer to it later or share it with your friends and loved ones. Ready to go? All right, let's jump in and meet our speakers, Lynnette Khalfani-Cox and Allie Smith Goodwin. Lynnette Khalfani-Cox, the money coach, is a personal finance expert, speaker, and author of 15 money management books, including the New York Times bestseller Zero Debt, The Ultimate Guide to Financial Freedom. She's been on more than 1,000 TV segments nationwide, including television appearances on Oprah, Dr. Phil, The Dr. Oz Show, Steve Harvey Show, Good Morning America, Today Show, and many more. A former financial news journalist for the Wall Street Journal and CNBC, Lynnette is the CEO of the MoneyCoach.net LLC, a financial education company that she runs with her husband and co-founder, Earl Cox. Welcome, Lynnette.
Hi there. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here. Next up is Allie Smith Goodwin, and she brings over 18 years of senior living experience to Brookdale. She started her career as a community sales manager in a continuing care retirement community. From there, she held positions in both sales and operations. In her current role, Allie supports nearly 100 communities across all product lines as a divisional director of sales. And Allie found her love of seniors growing up and volunteering within her community, and has a passion for providing the best care and lifestyle to the seniors we serve. Welcome, Allie.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here today.
Yeah, thanks. Okay, so we're going to start by talking about considering senior living. So Lynnette, about what age might people start thinking about senior living as an option?
Well, I certainly think that when you're, right around 50, in your 50s, that's a good time to start thinking about senior living. I hit that milestone, I might add. So I'll just say I'm in that early zone, and I'll just my husband is 5 years older than I am. No, I'll be specific just in case anybody wants to know, like, hey, exactly when? Mid 50s? I'm 52. My husband Earl is 57. Certainly we're having conversations about what we want our retirement to look like, what might be best for us from a residential living standpoint in the future. But honestly, I think a lot of people are probably going to start having these conversations even earlier. And, there's two kind of ways to look at this from a financial planning perspective. It's never too early to do anything. Let me tell you that. So especially anything on the retirement front, anything looking at your financial future, it's great to have a long-term vision. But the real reason I think a lot of people probably are starting to have these conversations sooner is that even if they aren't thinking about residential living, for example, as an option for themselves, they've likely had to have some conversations or discussions or some thoughts with family members about others in the family, say aging parents or maybe grandparents, that kind of thing. So, as a benchmark, I'd say, right around your 50s is when you might start thinking about this. And again, if you got parents, my mom is 77, for example, my dad is 78. Chances are you've had some conversations with them about what they want things to look like for them down the road.
So Allie, that's interesting. Lynnette's talking about your first experience with senior living is probably helping your parents or grandparents, right? So how can adult children best help their parents or grandparents or anyone in deciding on their future living arrangements?
That's a great question. And to really piggyback what Lynnette had said, is it's about just starting the discussion now. And you really need to find out what is getting harder. And that doesn't necessarily mean physically getting harder. For our independent living residents, that can be socialization. It can be healthy meals where it's hard to cook for 1 or 2 people, and you really don't have the desire to do that any longer. It could be exercise and just getting out and about, those things that help us thrive every day, and really seeing what that is. But it also can mean what is physically getting harder for our loved ones and beginning to talk about that. And it also can be from a family struggle, the time management and the day-to-day life commitments, feeling torn between giving time to our grandparents or parents and our everyday commitments. And a lot of those things can start that conversation and helping to plan. But planning is the key. So the other part is you don't want to wait until something happens to make a decision without a plan. Many of us have plans in place. We know what the future looks like, and we've talked to our own, maybe younger children about what we see for the future. But one of the most stressful times is when we meet a family who hasn't had those conversations, and it's even more stressful because there's questions on whether they're making the right decision. Are they doing what their loved one would like? And they could not be ready for that stage of their life because we haven't even spoke about it yet. So it's having that conversation now really is key for us to be able to make sure that we know what that plan looks like and there is a smooth transition if needed.
That's great. And so Lynnette, if couples are starting, like you said, you and your husband, and there's an age difference, right? What about couples that are trying to think now about their own future together in retirement? Are there certain factors they should take into account if they think that a senior living facility is going to be a good option for them? I know it's funny, you said 50s, and my husband and I are starting to have those conversations. And, you start thinking about what you want that to look like, right? Like, do you want to travel? What kinds of things do you want to do in retirement? And what does retirement look like for you? So those I know are a lot of things that we take into consideration too, right? So what about that? What about couples trying to think about that, right? What are the factors we should take into account if we're thinking about senior living?
Well, I think a couple things are important for couples to think about when they're going to consider senior living for themselves. First is a question of timing, right? Because you often find that couples have different visions, different ideas, different thoughts and goals about when to do something. Even just the practical point of retiring, you certainly don't have to be retired if you don't want to be, to live in a residential living facility. But we often find that one person might say, you know what? I wanted to retire at X age. And then the other one was thinking like, I thought we would retire together, at a different age. So certainly age considerations about when you might do something, that is something to consider. Location is also something that's super important because somebody might be thinking, I want to live near the kids or the grandkids. And another member of the household, the other spouse, for example, might have said, well, I always wanted to go someplace that was warm or by the beach or next to, friends or activities of their choice, that kind of thing. So geographic considerations are definitely going to come into play as well. And then just the overall environment. Some people like to be in like super busy areas, right? Some people prefer an urban setting. Some might prefer a more rural setting, or some people might even like more thriving environment. There's college towns where some folks, as they get older, actually say, I want to be around younger people to help me to stay, engaged with community, et cetera. So it all really boils down to couples being willing to talk a lot and to communicate, of course, about their expectations, their desires, and also, of course, being willing to compromise, because I don't know, it seems like God always put two opposites together. Just like in the financial world, you might have, say, a spender and a saver. There's a lot of financial opposites when it comes to, finances, when it comes to our goals and desires. So you've got to get on the same page with your mate as well.
Yeah, that makes sense. And it was early. Talk about it early. So, Allie, can you talk a little bit about common myths and misconceptions people have about senior living? It's such a different world today, right? And a lot of people still hold a lot of myths or misunderstandings about what senior living really means and what it offers.
Absolutely, because there are a lot of myths. Being in senior living for 18 years, I have heard a lot of myths and misconceptions on what senior living is, especially for somebody who hasn't seen it before. So let's first start with, I say, this isn't your grandparents' senior living any longer. The days of urine smells, the tile hallways, the white walls, the wheelchairs where everybody's slumped over that you used to visualize. And I remember as a child going to see my great grandparents, and that's gone. So it's a new day, it's a new age. And there are so many different levels of senior living care that weren't out there before. So first of all, if you haven't seen senior living in a while, or you've only looked at, say, one line of senior living, it can be very different. We see standalone independent living communities, and we also see people retiring and moving into a senior living community at a much younger age than we used to, because it's a lifestyle. We also offer now a continuum of care where people are planning for the future. As Lynnette mentioned, people are planning, thinking about the future. We have now product lines that offer a retirement living, and then later in life, we offer assisted living, memory care, and even skilled nursing available on what can be a campus setting. It can almost feel like you're going to a resort. When I was a community sales manager years ago, I used to take my kids to events, and they would actually get more excited than going on a school field trip, because they would say, this place is so great. It's like Disneyland for older people. And they would run to the car on a Saturday when maybe I'd be like, oh, I'm going to work on a Saturday. They'd be like, we get to go to your community. It's going to be great. So those old myths and those old visions that you had, you need to take those out of your mind and really go see and experience. It really is an experience of what it is we have in senior living today. Because I will tell you, when I was a community sales manager, and I still hear it today from sales managers that I support with the communities, is the majority of our people that move into our seniors that move into our communities say, I should have done this earlier. I don't know why I waited. That's our number one response.
And Janet, if I could just jump in there too, just to kind of piggyback on what Allie was saying there. I love that concept of kids saying, Disneyland for older adults. Imagine how thrilled they must feel then, the ones who are actually experiencing it. But that's actually true. I know that based on my work with AARP, they're clients of mine. I've worked with them since 2010. And one of the things that I think a lot of people don't realize, if they are stuck in the past and dealing with some myths and misconceptions about how people are aging, where they're doing it, et cetera, they're thinking about the stuff that their grandparents did and what they experienced, et cetera. And they're not thinking of today's retirees, today's baby boomers, et cetera, who are quite active, who are very much engaged, who are, having their busy schedules, and half of them are like, I need a little more time because they've got so much going on. They might have cultural activities, arts programs that they're doing, yoga classes that they're taking, walking clubs that they're part of. They might be doing painting and, all kind of creative outlets. And so one of the things that I think is really super important to for families to know when it comes to senior living as an option, especially right now, as you're thinking about things with the pandemic and the coronavirus outbreak, is that older adults have really gone through just a tough year of social isolation. And many have experienced a lot of loneliness. So I would say that for anybody who, say, has a parent who's been, far away and you've not been able to be as connected or as engaged and as close to as you'd like because of the pandemic, or maybe grandparents or just older relatives in general, of course, we've all been checking in on them, trying to FaceTime and whatnot. But one of the real benefits of senior living is that you're helping them establish community and forge relationships and friendships and levels of engagement that they probably wouldn't have on their own. They have an opportunity to connect with others, an opportunity to try out things and to do activities, to stay sharp and alert and fresh and engaged by having so many things at their disposal that they can try out to do. Because, I don't know, I wouldn't have necessarily said came up with Disneyland, but it is a more robust, engaging, fun environment where you have people who are aging, but it's not like, oh, we're putting grandma in the corner over here to sit, by herself kind of thing. No, it's a lot of stimulation, frankly, and an enjoyable activity. So I just wanted to highlight and to kind of piggyback off of that whole kind of Disneyland thing to make people understand what it's like, especially for those who haven't yet seen a facility or been to a residential, senior residential living community.
Yeah, and Allie, you were nodding to that idea of continuity of care, right? That you could stay in many of our places, like in the same place, and have multiple types of care. So you don't have to necessarily leave to a whole new place when you move from assisted living into something else, right?
No, that's correct. There are standalone independent living communities, standalone assisted living, or you may have memory care, or you have what we call a continuum of care that offers multi-product lines that are available. And some are really drawn to that to be able to make for ease later on. When you get to know an executive director and the dining service and the front desk and the care staff and the housekeepers, it's nice to know is if you need to transition through care to get more support later on, those same people are still there to be able to help you with that. And that's a big draw for a lot of people.
Yeah, absolutely. And Lynnette, so when we're considering senior living, how much should geographic considerations like weather, access to a regional healthcare, proximity to your relatives, how much should that play a role in families' decisions when they're kind of narrowing down their options?
I do think that all of those factors are crucial to consider when you're thinking about senior residential living. Listen, let's be honest. All of us have different preferences, different tastes and desires, and a different appetite for certain type of living and certain types of environments. Again, for example, I was fed up with the Northeast. And so before the pandemic hit in 2019, I kind of twisted my husband's arm and said, listen, I want to get out of New Jersey. We came to Texas. And again, I was a person who was raised in Southern California. So I was used to warmer climates and I like the sun. I'm one of those people who totally believes in SAD, that concept that they call it seasonal affective disorder. And so I like and very much prefer to be in warm weather climates. And so I'm loving it here in the greater Houston area. So yes, I do think that if someone, for example, likes the cold and likes, true seasons all the time. Some people have said here in Texas, we have two seasons, like spring and summer, and that's about it. And other folks here have said to me, oh my gosh, you left New Jersey. I really, I love those true seasons. I like to go visit, or I wish we had that here. So you do have to think about your own preferences when it comes to temperature and climate and the environment, that kind of thing. But of course, your family, those considerations should come to bear in your decision making as well. I don't have any grandkids. However, my first daughter, my oldest daughter, who is 23, actually got married last year. And my husband keeps saying, even though we're in the greater Houston area and she's in Austin, about 2 hours and 15 minutes away, my husband keeps saying, like, oh, I know that grandma gene is going to kick in when she has a baby and you're going to want to move closer. You're going to want to move to Austin then. And I keep saying, no, I'm just going to want to travel and go everywhere, after our youngest goes off to college. But I do think, and again, having dealt with so many folks over the years who are in their 50s, 60s, 70s, and beyond, many of them do actually get to that point where they're like, I want to be closer to my kids. I want to be able to see the grandkids. I don't want to have to necessarily hop on a plane or travel a long distance. I'd like the family to have greater access to me. So those travel considerations do come into play. And just the idea of proximity and ease with which family members can get to see one another, it becomes an issue, certainly for older people who may not want to travel. Now, members of Gen Z, millennials might want to hop on a plane. Gen Xers like me, hop on a plane, you'll go. But again, you should take into account all of those factors when you're deciding on your future residential living choices.
Yeah. And when we think about senior living, Allie, what are some of the factors that people need to be aware of that affect the price of senior living, right? There's a lot of variability in it, but can you share some factors that affect the range of typical expenses and the average cost for senior living?
Absolutely. So let's start with location. So we're seeing this every day. We're hearing stories about real estate market. It's booming right now. And families that are actually moving out of state, relocating across the country because they can't necessarily afford to live and buy homes in the market they're in. So with senior living, geography and location is a huge variable as well. When you're talking about the Northeast, prices are very different in the Northeast than, say, Texas or Oklahoma or oceanfront in California versus, a Montana or Wyoming community. All of these things are part of the decision and the costs associated with it. Other factors that can be associated with it are local and state taxes, right? That plays into overall costs of senior living. And one of the biggest things, though, that really does pay is wage. What is that wage and the costs for wage for our hourly associates that are a part of the cost that people might not necessarily think of when they're looking at the expenses of senior living. So that's just one variable. Now, there's another variable that you look at as well when we talked about standalone independent living versus continuum of care. So an independent living community that is just independent living community doesn't have the overhead and the cost, say, of nursing staff, of direct care, which can, whether you are part of a community or not, and utilizing those healthcare services, they add to the overall expenses at a community. So you may look at an independent living community that is by itself, and they don't have those extra costs that they necessarily would absorb. So you may be like, why is an independent living community over here so much more than an independent living community at a continuum of care retirement community or something that offers multi-product lines? And those are some of the costs that you're going to look at when doing that. You're also going to be looking at services and time. So if you're, independent, you could have no meals, you could have one meal, you could have 3 meals, you could have a cottage where maybe you're still paying for your utilities and other added costs with that. There are so many different types of retirement and senior living out there, but then it also comes down to care. How much time, not necessarily direct care or support do you need to live the lifestyle you want? And when I say support, we have services such as concierge, and that can be someone that's helping with your grocery shopping service. That can be shuttle services. There can be, we have in-house many times beauticians or barber shops and nail salons, a lot of different things that you look at that can be of added cost. So the best thing you can do when you're really looking at senior living and the variety of costs is sit down with a community sales manager. That's their job, is to really ask, what is getting harder? What does your vision look like? What are you hoping to have by moving to a community? And they can give you the variety of costs and the best solutions for you.
And also because I know somebody. Okay, exactly. Maybe we can drill down a little bit too and talk about some of the specifics and the numbers. And again, correct me if I'm wrong on any of this stuff. But people need. There's a move-in fee, right, for the resident, if it's a couple, an individual, that kind of thing, to move in there. And those are generally along the lines of about $1,000 to roughly $5,000. Again, geography plays a huge role. And I'm glad that Allie highlighted that, because I can tell you the old adage, in real estate, location, 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 it definitely comes to bear in residential living, just like it does in any aspect of real estate. Just again, anecdotally, because I moved in 2019 from New Jersey from the Northeast to here in the South, even the house that I had in New Jersey, we kept that house, we rented it out. We're now listing it. It's a super hot, obviously, real estate market right now. We're listing it for sale, but long story short, that house is about less than one half of the size of the house that I have now in Texas, which the cost here in Texas was about 2/3 price. So those regional or geographic disparities are definitely very tied to your local markets. But when you're going to have a residential living facility as an option, you're definitely going to be paying monthly rent, essentially, a fee. And it's typically along the lines of, $3,000 or so to $6,000 per month. And again, you're going to be looking at the variety there is based on the amount of services you're getting, the type of assistance, as Allie mentioned, whether or not there's meals, whether there's transportation, whether there's other factors from, housekeeping or activities and amenities. All of those things are definitely going to play a role in terms of what the overall cost is going to be. So those variables, of course, are many. And so it's kind of hard to just say, here, this is the actual price, because there is no one price. It's like saying, what's the price of a house? Well, it varies based on all of the upgrades or amenities or, the treatments inside the house, et cetera. And of course, the location of the house itself.
Yeah, that's a lot to consider. I want to remind everybody to pop your questions in for Lynnette or Allie into the Q&A. We're going to get to those at the end, but you can pop them in right now. So if something pops up and you have a question, please feel free to pop it in the Q&A, and we're going to get to those at the end. But you can pop those in at any time. So Lynnette, another thing that people sometimes don't understand is about Medicare, and it does not pay for assisted living expenses, right?
That's correct. A lot of people mistakenly think that Medicare covers your residential living costs, but no, it does not. Medicaid does provide some level of assistance, but again, that's typically for folks who have lower incomes, lower assets, and then again, it's only for partial type of coverage, and it's going to vary really by state. Again, there's no kind of general rule of thumb I can tell everybody on that, because I see that just based on people who've joined us, they're all over the country here. But even Medicaid is one of those programs that's kind of a joint federal and state program. And thus that's the reason why we have this sort of patchwork. It differs from state to state. But overall, no, don't mistakenly think that essentially the health care program, Medicare, which is, what folks are eligible for when they get to age 65, that's going to cover your residential living costs, because no, it does not.
Got it. Allie, when we think about different benefits that people could get, what about our veterans? Are there veteran benefits available that can help our veterans cover the cost of senior living?
There's a program called Veterans Aid and Attendance that we have, and we actually partner with Brookdale with Patriot Angels. So I will tell you, we actually used this service with my mother-in-law when she moved into a senior living community. The Aid and Attendance program through the VA can be cumbersome. It can feel overwhelming. You can feel lost. And the first question is, do you even qualify for it? So some of the questions are, how do you qualify? And the short answer is, you need to have service during an active wartime. It also requires certain physical support that you're going to need. So there is a clinical test that you will go through in the way of a physical assessment. And then there's also the financial component of it as well. So the best thing I can tell anyone to be able to do is actually reach out to someone like Patriots Angels, who are trained and specialize in this, and be able to work through the process. They're going to start with a questionnaire on the phone with you to say, tell me a little bit about who you're looking for, the care you're looking for, and they're going to walk you through that process, and they're going to ask you several questions, and then they're going to give you a very normally pretty quick turnaround answer on whether they think you're going to qualify for that. But it's great to have somebody that's dedicated to the actual Veterans Aid and Attendance program, such as Patriots Angels, that can really help you through this process, because many people will give up because they just don't know how to get the program started. So that's why we partner with someone like Patriots Angels to be able to help be a better resource for those who are wanting to find out more about the benefit.
That's great. And when we think about how we afford this, right, Lynnette, what are the types of resources that individuals, couples, or families, what are different ways that they can pay for senior living that might surprise people?
So a couple of things that might be surprising to people when it comes to paying for senior residential living is that you might be able to tap into life insurance benefits and get coverage that way. So some people obviously think about life insurance and think, well, this is going to happen it's going to be a benefit to somebody when I die or when I pass away. What are you talking about here? Well, actually, some life insurance policies have so-called living benefits, or some people in the industry call them accelerated benefits, meaning that the policy holder, the person who took out the life insurance policy, can benefit from those premiums they've been paying right now. The money doesn't necessarily have to go to their heirs or to their designated beneficiaries. And that's typically the case for people who have, for example, permanent or whole life insurance policies. Remember, there's two different sort of dominant types of life insurance. You have term life insurance, and then you have permanent coverage, where people can typically build up a cash value in that life insurance. So even just if someone doesn't have a policy that has those accelerated or those living benefits, they might have amassed over time significant cash value in the life insurance policy if they've been holding that policy for many, many years, for example. And it's not actually uncommon for a lot of people who are in their late 60s or 70s, et cetera, to have done just that. So life insurance is one thing. Certainly long-term care, if somebody has a long-term care policy as well, that can cover your residential living costs as well for senior living. And then there's other things too. Of course, you're going to look at the family's resources, right? So very frequently, it'll be the case that the individual or the couple that has decided to move into a senior residential facility, they're going to be using their own resources, either in part or in whole, to cover the cost. But you definitely have children who are, in their, say, 40s, for example, who are helping to foot the bill for mom and dad. Sometimes grandkids, depending on the age of the person, or other relatives and family members. So you'll want to look at all of those factors as options when it comes to covering the cost for senior residential living. And I should mention one last thing, again, that might be surprising since you use that word, what might surprise people. Even things like reverse mortgages can be a great tool, can be a great way for people to cover the cost of senior residential living. So how does it work? I'll just give you the quick and dirty version of it. In essence, you have to be 62 years old to qualify for a reverse mortgage. And as the name suggests, a reverse mortgage is kind of the reverse or the opposite of a traditional mortgage, where, of course, you're paying out money to the lender, to, say, a bank, a credit union, et cetera, every single month. Well, a reverse mortgage is available to those who either own their homes outright or they have large amounts of equity in their houses, meaning that they've paid down a good chunk of the principal balances on their mortgages. And so in effect, you're able to tap into the equity in that house, get cash out of it in that way, and then use that to cover your senior residential living costs. Now, the good thing about a reverse mortgage is that you don't have to pay anything back to the lender while you're alive. And so sometimes couples will even strategically use this. Let's say one person needs care, needs some assistance, and the other member of the couple is not able to do everything and to supply their needs. One party decides to move into a residential living facility that has a little more care and services available. The second party is still living in the home, so they don't have to move out of the home, no problem. Again, no payments are due to the bank or to the lender at that point. And essentially what happens is both parties have to pass away before the bank can do anything with that house or assume that property in order to repay the loan. If the loan amount that's due X years in the future, 20 years down the road or whatever, when both parties pass away, there'll be a certain balance that's due. And again, they're using schedules. They're looking at interest, of course, that's been accruing on top of these loans. But as long as the house appreciates at a certain amount, it pays off the loan in full. There may even be some money left over to leave behind from the sale of the house to kids or to grandkids, et cetera. In no case, though, will the estate of the couple owe anything more to the lender or anything like that. So I do think that people who are interested might look into, even for whatever purposes, if they think they need a reverse mortgage, might look into that as a financial option. Certainly want to know the pros and cons and understand that, but it definitely can be a tool used to pay for senior residential living.
And what about, I know before I had heard you mention something like employer benefits too, potentially, right? Allie or Lynnette, what do you want to talk about that?
Sure, I'll just very briefly say, Allie was talking about just overall benefits. But yes, I'm always telling people that certainly throughout, corporate America and even, the private sector, government agencies, et cetera, there are a whole host of benefits that go unused or underutilized, to say the least. And certainly what we're finding now in today's sort of marketplace, a lot of employers are in fact trying to attract and retain top talent. So they know that they have to be competitive when it comes to benefits and perks and a variety of things that they're offering to employees to keep them as long-term workers. So many of them do in fact offer a variety of caregiving type or family help type of benefits. And we typically think about, some employers might give you some assistance to pay for daycare or something to do with your kids, but the same is true for those who have aging parents, for example, or who might need or want to go into senior residential living for themselves. So you should definitely ask your employer in particular, I would check with the HR department. Probably the head of HR or whoever's the HR guru in your office will know whether or not you have any benefits that might apply in this case, and that can be used to pay for these services as well.
Well, and Lynnette, since you mentioned it, I think I will talk about something that we have with Brookdale, which is our large employer group discount. So it is a partnership that we have. Our community sales managers have an updated list because we add, as you mentioned, it's a perk now, right? Many companies are adding this. So we do have the large employer group that we are constantly partnering with many companies to add this to as a benefit through Brookdale that we have. So please, if it's something that you would like to check to see if you qualify for a large employer discount, reach out to your local community sales manager. I do believe they put a phone number that you can get connected with a local community as well, and they can go through that discount with you as well.
That's great. This is a lot of great information. Thank you so much. Before we start with the Q&A, we've got a lot of questions piling up. But before we start with the Q&A, we want to let you all know that you can get our free guide, The 6 Best Kept Secrets to Financing Senior Care, on our website at brookdale.com/ebook. So you can go there and check that out. A reminder, you're going to get this via email. You're going to get the recording of this webinar as well as all this information so you can refer to it later. You can share it with family or friends. So you can get that on our website. Also, to follow Lynnette for more great money advice, check out askthemoneycoach.com or follow her on any of her social feeds noted right here. And you can either screen capture that now or come back later and write them down. All that great information to follow Lynnette. So now it's time to hear from all of you. We have some questions already coming in. We welcome all your questions. Again, to ask a question, look for the Q&A button at the bottom of your webinar screen. Click that, type in your question, click send, and we'll see it and respond. And just put it in the comments if you're on Facebook Live, and we're going to get to as many as we can. And we're going to start with a great question. A great question for you, Allie, which is, what are some of the added or specialty services that are provided at Brookdale Senior Living Facilities?
So with Brookdale, we actually offer not just senior living, but other aspects and support as well. So we've talked, we have for independent living, we offer assisted living, we offer memory care, but we also have skilled nursing, which a portion of that can be accessed by your Medicare under certain requirements. So you can actually come and stay at a Brookdale that does offer skilled nursing as well. But we also offer home health, hospice services as well. But we also offer personalized living. So maybe you're more independent, but you just need a little bit of help here and there. We offer those services as well. Now, those can range in cost depending on how much additional services you're looking for, right? It's kind of like when I ask my housekeeper to do a deep clean versus coming in, once a month for a couple hours, I'm going to pay for additional services and additional costs. And if I want a chef's table versus just going out to a restaurant, you're going to pay for more additional hands-on services and more hands-on attention. But we offer a variety of services, and those can range in a variety of costs as well. But the great thing is we can also sit down with you and look at those, and it's just not cut and dry. We really do cater everything we do to an individual and a family. So it's, as Lynnette mentioned earlier, you can't just say how much for a house in real estate. There's so much that goes into that, how many bedrooms, how many baths, location, all of those types of things. This is the same type of thing. We want to be able to sit down and plan with you, and then we can give you a great roadmap to costs as well.
That makes sense. Like everyone's individual needs and what they want. That makes sense. Okay, Lynnette, here's a good one. I want to know this too. Is there a certain amount of money we should have saved before we enter into senior living?
Ooh, that's a great question. And really what that is a retirement question. If you, well, I guess it kind of depends. I'm going to sort of make the assumption that the person is retired and is no longer working. So literally there's whole books written on that, right? Where folks try to look at how much they need for the next part of their life. And what I can tell you is that, unfortunately, there's no sort of magic number. And part of it is because of longevity factors. So, of course, as we're all aging, we're all getting not just older, but we're living longer because of advances in medicine and healthcare and technology. Just think back to, a generation or two ago. Some people retired and then unfortunately they passed away right after they retired, or maybe even before they retired. But now it's not at all uncommon for people to live well into their 80s, 90s. I know that many financial planners won't even do any kind of long-term financial planning for their clients without going to age 100. In other words, they want to look at all of your assets and they want to say, what is the income sources that you have right now? What additional monies will you have coming in? And how can I make sure that we're building a game plan for you where your money will live or will last until at least age 100? In other words, they want your money to outlast you. They don't want you to outlast your money. So let's say you move in there at the age of 68 or 70. And you think, I've had a pretty good time of it health-wise. I know that genetically, my family has been pretty healthy. My mom lived to age 93. Her mom lived to age 91. And so you have some longevity in your family, right? If you say I've, lived a pretty clean life, et cetera, you might be thinking, I have at least 20 plus years that it's likely statistically that I will be around. So you really want to cost out, what will my overall cost be for the next 20 plus years, if it was in fact the case that you moved in, say, at age 70. But again, I think really what the question is getting to at the heart of it is about, when we retire, how much should we have in the bank kind of thing? Or and I don't want people, sometimes you'll hear a lot of people say, oh, you should have 500,000, you should have $1 million. They'll throw out just sort of random numbers. And I'm always super cautious about doing that, honestly, because of two reasons. One is that you're going to depress some people, right? Some people are going to go, oh my God, I'm never going to get that number. And they'll practically be like, I should just give up. I might as well not even try. And so they might think that's not realistic. That's not viable or doable for me. But the other reason is that everybody's lifestyle costs are very much different, right? So a good rule of thumb, just a general rule of thumb, is that certainly whatever your income was before you retired or plan to retire, if you're getting, 80 to 90% of that in terms of your income sources in retirement through savings and investment, through any kind of income that might be thrown off your way, maybe via annuities or rental properties, and through things like Social Security, which you'll be collecting at a certain point. You can collect that again from age 62 and later. Again, I would encourage you to wait as long as possible to collect, because every year that you wait, you add about 8% to your Social Security check. But overall, if you're covering about 80%, maybe even 90%, some advisors like you to try to cover 100% of what your pre-retirement income was, then you're in a pretty safe zone. And you should be pretty much just fine.
That's great. Thank you. Yeah, I know people live such different lives. What's frugal for one person is not for another. So it all is depending on who you are and how you live.
Hey. They're like, oh, the first thing I want to do, not even when we retire, we have a 15-year-old, and in 3 more years, she'll be off to college. And my husband has said, especially after this year that we just had with the pandemic, he said, as soon as she goes off to college, we're taking a year off. He's like, we're going to go traveling around. And I was like, honey, not to wait till we retire. He's like, nope, when she goes to college.
We're not waiting.
So, it involves.
Allie, here's a great question. If I can get care at home, and we have a couple people asking, if I could just be by myself at home and get care, why wouldn't I do that versus pay to go live in an assisted living facility?
So there's several aspects. So I'm glad this question got brought up because we do get this question quite regularly. So first of all, you have to look at how much time at home do you need care. So that's also why in many of our markets, we offer home health as well, or our nurse on call. Because if you're looking for just an hour or two of support, that might be a better option. And that's why we offer additional services as well outside our actual, what we call the walls of Brookdale, our senior living communities. But then there's a balance. So when you look at costs and you're weighing these costs, that can add up very quickly on having a large hourly rate coming in, and you're paying then still for a mortgage or your utilities, you're still buying food, you have your home insurance, you have, all these costs of day-to-day living in your home that sometimes you forget to take into consideration. When you back out all of those costs, at a certain point, it's actually a benefit to move into an assisted living or even independent living and have some personal care come in to be able to help support that, or memory care. There is that balance in that line. And we actually have a cost comparison sheet with Brookdale that, once again, you can reach out to your community sales manager and they can go through that with you line by line on things that you may not even think about when you're our day-to-day expenses or our yearly expenses that pop up that we don't think about every day, that can break down into the costs that you may not see in senior living or may equal out the benefit. But that's just one aspect. Then you talk about socialization, okay, and interaction. And even during the pandemic, we unfortunately didn't have nearly as much interaction, even in senior living. I think we all, you mentioned how depression, I think we all in senior living felt a depression as well, working in it. And when our hearts are to serve, we love people, we love seniors. That's what helps us every day thrive. We are people, right? That's what we're here for. And that's what we love. And you don't necessarily get that with home with someone coming in. So it's the balance of that as well. But then the other aspect is, the last aspect I want to talk about is consistency. It is a lot of caregivers are a different generation than even when I started out, 18 years ago. Our caregivers that come in to work at our communities know that our residents need them every single day. They need them to be able sometimes to help with dressing, bathing, to live their best life. And not everyone, when you bring in home care, has that same type of commitment. And a lot of families that we help support and that reach out to us say, my mom has had a caregiver call off 3 times this week. And, something happened, or I'm worried something's going to happen. And with Brookdale and how we have things set up, we have staffing plans. We are constantly recruiting. We have things in place. Our residents are taken care of every single day. And you don't have to worry, is somebody going to show up today to help take care of me? And that actually can have great peace of mind. And really, can you put a price then on peace of mind when you look at that as well?
Those are really good points, really good things to remember. Hey, Lynnette, we have a question coming in from Facebook. Could you touch on Medicaid again and how Medicaid plays into financing this?
So, Medicaid, I was saying that people mistakenly think that Medicare is going to cover it, and it doesn't. And I think, just to be clear about that, one of the reasons that people think Medicare, might cover their costs in a residential facility is that it can cover for short-term stays, but it's really only when people have illness or an accident, injury, if they need rehabilitation of some kind, that can be done in your house or even at a facility. But that's a short-term thing, and that's totally different from having your longer-term permanent stay at a senior residential facility. So it's not going to be on the Medicare front. But Medicaid does have some benefits where that people could get assistance to cover senior living facilities. However, you have to qualify for it. You have to be eligible for it. And that's the hard part, because they make it tough. Honestly, it's sort of strict requirements in terms of who is eligible for those Medicaid benefits. And in a nutshell, and I want to say the number now is about $2,000 or so in terms of assets that one could have. So essentially, they want you to be low in terms of your number of assets, and they'll include or exclude various things. And they want you to essentially also have low income in order to qualify. And part of what I was articulating is that it varies, because just like, unemployment, for example, is a hybrid benefit. It's a joint federal state program. So, here in Texas, or I shouldn't even just say Texas, literally like nationwide, weekly unemployment benefits in some areas like in Alabama, Mississippi, et cetera, are going to be, $200 something per week. But in New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, it can be $700 per week, right? So there's this huge range because that's the state variances and the differences there. So likewise, when it comes to Medicaid, it's a joint initiative, a joint financial sort of enterprise where the rules for one state and the benefits that are in one state will not necessarily be the exact same rules and the exact same benefits in another state. So it really does vary based on states.
Great.
Well, and there's also a healthcare criteria to that as well. So you could meet the assets and you could meet the income, but they also want to make sure it's needs generated. So just like the VA aid and attendance, there's a portion of it that is a physical assessment. You have the same thing with Medicaid, because they want to make sure that they're dispersing those funds and that support to those that really need the more urgent care and support as well.
Yeah. Great. Thank you for that. The time is gone. Our time is up, and that went so fast. And Lynnette and Allie, I sincerely want to thank you for joining us today. And thank you to all of you for being here and asking such great questions. We're going to email you a recording and transcript of the webinar. You'll be able to view it again, share with family and friends. And please join us for our next webinar on Wednesday, May 19th at 2 p.m. Eastern. The subject will be COVID-19, how we're moving forward, with a roundtable of Brookdale experts reflecting on how the pandemic has affected their communities and how they're planning on moving forward in the months to come. You can register at brookdale.com/intheknow. And our webinars feature a different subject every month, and you can visit that same website to learn more. We sure hope to see you again soon. Until next time, we hope you stay safe, happy, and well. Thank you so much.